We are diving deep into Thales of Miletus today. He's the one figure, really, who's credited with drawing that line in the sand.
Right, between relying on myth and looking for natural law.
He's the acknowledged founder of Western philosophy and science, and an elusive figure from around, 625 BC?
Something like that. And it's hard to overstate his importance. I mean, when we use the word philosophy...
Love of wisdom.
Exactly. It's Thales and his circle who really give us that concept. He is the starting gun for systematic, rational inquiry in Europe.
And what's crucial for you to understand is that this monumental shift, it didn't happen in classical Athens.
No, not at all. The first philosophical systems, they came from the Ionian cities.
On the western coast of Asia Minor.
That's it, Miletus. Miletus was the largest, the wealthiest, the most dynamic of these Greek cities.
The trading hub.
A huge one. It was a nexus where Eastern knowledge, Egyptian astronomy, Phoenician navigation, it all just flowed in. Commerce, industry, culture, it all developed there way earlier than in Greece proper.
Creating the perfect intellectual petri dish.
You couldn't have designed it better for critical thought.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're dealing with a legend, not a detailed biography. The biggest challenge in studying Thales is the sources, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're reaching back 2.5 millennia.
We have almost none of his original writing.
Nothing direct. What we know comes from later chroniclers, centuries after he lived. They compiled notes, arguments, and sometimes, highly exaggerated anecdotes.
So we're often wading through invented stories.
And legends that just accumulated over time, yeah.
So our mission statement for this deep dive is clear. This is a shortcut to understanding why this shadowy figure is credited with bridging that vast chasm.
Between explaining the world through the arbitrary will of the gods.
And explaining it through predictable, verifiable laws of nature.
We have to begin with his reputation.
Yes.
Even in antiquity, Thales was consistently named as the most popular, the wisest, the famous 7 Greek sages.
And always named first, right?
Often named first, yeah. He wasn't just a smart guy. He was seen as the supreme intellect of his generation.
And the legends totally support that status. That famous story of the fisherman's tripod.
A perfect example.
A magnificent golden tripod is found at sea, and, it's designated for the wisest among them.
Right, and it cycles through all the sages, each one deferring to the next.
Yeah, no, you are wiser.
Until it ultimately comes back to Thales. It's a powerful narrative device. It suggests that wisdom is something that recognizes itself, and Thales was the standard.
We see a similar story with the cup of King Croesus.
Who reigned during Thales' lifetime. That cup was also meant for the wisest of the Hellenes.
And it went back to Thales.
And he was celebrated specifically for his skill in observing the stars.
So his reputation was built on practical, predictive knowledge, even before we get to the big philosophical ideas.
Definitely. But his biography, it remains a collection of contrasts. Later accounts often clash.
On pretty basic things.
Absolutely. Some sources claim he was of noble Phoenician descent, later registered as a citizen of Miletus. Most scholars, though, they argue he was a native Milesian from a prominent family.
The truth is a bit murky.
It is, but the message is clear. He was an influential man, whether by birth or by sheer intellect.
And we also see this famous tension in his character. On one hand, he's the supremely practical man, the businessman, a view Aristotle really pushed.
And on the other, the utterly abstract, often impractical thinker.
That's Plato's version.
That's Plato's version, and even his personal life is up for debate.
Did he marry? Did he have a son?
Some say yes, a son named Cybisphus. Others say he stayed single and adopted his sister's son. The accounts just disagree.
But the stories about his views on marriage, they give us a great glimpse of his wit.
They do.
When his mother pressed him in his youth to marry, he supposedly said, too early.
And then later in life.
Too late. It's a wonderful piece of philosophical deflection. He already had his calling.
And that calling required serious effort. Thales wasn't just sitting in a study in Miletus thinking about the universe.
No, his travels were crucial.
To Egypt, possibly Central Asia. He lived among the Egyptian priests, collecting and synthesizing all this ancient empirical knowledge.
And he didn't just bring back scrolls, right? He brought back practical methods.
Exactly. The transfer of knowledge was physical. He's credited with introducing tools like the goniometer, the protractor, and navigation by the stars, which the Phoenicians knew inside and out.
The famous story of him measuring the height of the pyramids, that just demonstrates his whole approach perfectly.
It really does. Instead of brute force or estimation, he just waited.
for the precise hour when a person's shadow is equal to their height.
Right. And by the geometric principle of similar triangles, he could then conclude the pyramid's height was equal to its shadow.
That's such a simple, elegant application of mathematics to solve a massive real-world problem.
And that is the fundamental shift, isn't it? He wasn't content just to observe the sun.
He wanted to understand the rule by which the shadow changed.
Exactly. Thales was the first to explicitly seek to explain the world using knowledge. He was replacing the arbitrary will of the gods with the predictable laws of nature.
And Eastern cultures had accumulated tons of knowledge. They knew what happened.
But they hadn't pursued that Greek goal of a systematic underlying explanation.
And his science was rooted entirely in utility.
Especially for Miletus, the great trading port. His interest in meteors or, air phenomena.
It was all guided by commerce.
He needed to know about rain, wind, and stars so ships could safely deliver their high-value cargoes. There's an ancient observation that holds true here. Science has no other origin than practice.
His geometry wasn't some abstract art form.
No. It was how you survey fields after the Nile flooded or navigate across the Aegean.
This practical foundation then leads to him formalizing geometry. Tradition credits him with taking empirical Egyptian geometry and turning it into a rational, deductive science.
He introduced 5 specific theorems to Greece.
And the transition from just observation to actual proof is the heart of his scientific revolution.
It is. Think about a simple rule. The angles at the base of an isosceles triangle are equal. People had probably observed this for centuries.
Sure, just looks right.
But Thales showed why it must be true through a logical deduction, a formal proof, that move from it looks right to it is logically necessary. That's the birth of scientific methodology.
That's a much more powerful insight than just listing the theorems. And it all culminates in the most famous single concrete date linked to him, the prediction of the solar eclipse of 585 BC.
Herodotus records it. Thales predicted this event, which famously stopped the battle between the Lydians and Medes.
They saw it as a divine omen.
As divine disapproval, yeah.
Yeah.
It made Thales a legend in his own time.
Okay, but here's where we need to apply our deep dive skepticism.
Of course.
Could he really predict an eclipse that accurately 2,600 years ago without modern computing?
It's highly unlikely. It was a precise, scientifically calculated prediction in the modern sense.
So what was it then?
It's more probable, given his access to Babylonian and Egyptian knowledge, that he recognized the cyclical nature of eclipses.
So he knew one was possible that year.
Exactly, and that it could only happen during a new moon.
So he didn't predict the minute, but he predicted the concept.
That's the key. He demonstrated that celestial events are governed by rules, not the mood swings of a god. And that demonstration, regardless of the precision, had the same cultural impact as a perfect prediction.
It established the idea of a predictable, mechanistic cosmos.
And with that foundation, he can move on to the next big question.
So Thales synthesized all this practical knowledge, geometry, astronomy, the power of proof, and then he moved on to the core Ionian quest, the quest for the arch.
The first principle: what material is the world composed of?
This is where he stops being just a practical scientist and becomes the first philosopher.
He wasn't asking who created the world, but what it is made of.
And his answer was radical and, well, startlingly simple. Water. Wait, water. In a region surrounded by massive mountains, prone to earthquakes, scorching dry summers, why not something seemingly stronger, like rock?
Or more pervasive, like air.
Yeah. Isn't cheese and water almost simplistic?
It seems simplistic to us now, but you have to consider Thales' observations. Everything essential to life is sustained by moisture.
Okay, that's true.
Water changes state. It's liquid, it freezes into solid earth or ice, and it evaporates into air and clouds, which he saw as a kind of fire or vapor.
So it's the only element he could see that was capable of transforming into everything else.
So water represents change, life, and universality.
Precisely. For Thales, water was the wet primary substance. Everything constantly originates from it, and everything returns to it.
Earth was just the sediment of this element. Air and fire were its evaporations. He found the one element that could account for all states of matter and all aspects of life.
And if water is the foundation, that defines his whole cosmology. He believed the Earth must literally rest on water.
Yes, he argued the Earth floats in the freshwater ocean like a ship.
Which would make perfect sense to people living in an earthquake-prone area like Asia Minor.
Totally. If you asked why there were tremors, the answer was simple.
The Earth was just rocking on the waves.
Like a ship pitching in a turbulent sea. It was a physical explanation for a terrifying natural phenomenon. No angry god required.
And this foundational idea also informed his concept of hylozoism.
The animated world.
If everything originates from water, which is life-sustaining, then everything originating from it must possess some form of animating principle, a soul.
This is a critical philosophical connection. For Thales, the line between living and non-living was less important than the animating force that pervades all matter.
He had examples for this.
He famously pointed to magnets and amber. They generate movement, so therefore they possess a soul. The entire world, living and non-living, is pervaded by a moving principle he called the soul, or God.
So his universe was fully alive, unified by this wet, primary substance.
Which brings us back to that tension we talked about.
The abstract theorist versus the practical scientist.
Yes, and the philosophy world loves this contrast. It's perfectly reconciled by the famous olive press story, which Aristotle used to defend his old teacher.
The story goes that Thales was often mocked for his poverty.
People suggested philosophy was useless because it didn't generate wealth.
If you're so smart, why aren't you rich?
The classic line. So, to counter this, Thales used his astronomical knowledge, the same knowledge he used for navigation, to predict a massive olive harvest that coming year.
What's fascinating here is his execution. He used the limited resources he had
To monopolize all the olive presses in Miletus and Chios by renting them cheaply during the winter.
when demand was non-existent.
Right. Then, when the predicted boom arrived, demand surged uncontrollably. He rented them out at exorbitant prices on his own terms.
Making a massive profit in one season.
And in doing so, he demonstrated that philosophers can easily get rich, but
That is not the application of knowledge they choose to care about.
it's the ultimate mic drop. Knowledge is power, and wealth is just a byproduct he chose to reject in favor of inquiry.
But then, of course, we have the counter-narrative.
The one that defines the stereotypical absent-minded professor.
It's that tragic, enduring image from Plato and Aesop, the well story.
While observing the stars, gazing upward, Thales falls into a well.
And a quick-witted Thracian servant girl mocks him for trying to know the heavens while ignoring what was right at his feet.
That servant girl's commentary. The philosopher so removed from reality he can't see what's under his nose. That's the image that's sadly stuck in popular culture.
Far more than the shrewd olive press financier.
It perfectly illustrates the divide between those who value practical survival and those who value metaphysical exploration.
Yet, Thales himself offered a synthesis.
He did, in his ethical teachings, and those were perhaps his most immediate legacy to his contemporaries.
He left behind a kind of blueprint for living. Plutarch's record of the Banquet of the Seven Sages preserves some of his classic aphorisms.
Right. People valued his ability to distill universal truths into simple questions and answers. If you asked him, what is the most beautiful thing?
He said, the world.
And what did he believe was the wisest?
Time.
Time. Because it gave birth to one thing and will give birth to another. It's the ultimate context.
He said the strongest thing is necessity.
Because it is unconquerable. And he gave advice that still resonates. Do not gain wealth by bad means. Govern yourself while in power.
And the simple relational wisdom, expect the same support from your children that you gave your parents. He set a standard not just for scientific inquiry, but for moral behavior.
So that philosophy wasn't just about the stars, but also about the community.
So if we synthesize all this, Thales' monumental achievement wasn't really that he decided the world was made of water.
No, that was just his starting hypothesis.
His achievement was his willingness to look at the world, discard the divine myths, and just ask, why? Why do things happen based on discoverable natural laws?
He was the great bridge builder.
Yeah.
He took the practical utility of Eastern astronomy and geometry and fused it with metaphysical speculation about the ultimate arch.
He literally defined the parameters for what we now call science.
He was the first human being on record to move from observation to deduction. He established the principles of rational thought that underpin everything we study today.
And his final human moment, as reported by the chroniclers, it happened while watching others demonstrate physical prowess,
Thales, the man who charted the cosmos, died watching gymnastics.
succumbing to heat, thirst, and old age.
A very human end.
So he defined the starting point for science by asking a ridiculously simple tone. What is the world made of?
We've moved far beyond water. We classify elements, understand atoms, decode quantum fields. But this is the final thought for you.
What foundational philosophical or scientific assumption are you holding today? something you take absolutely for granted that will look just as simple, almost quaint, to thinkers 1,000 years from now.
That relentless willingness to question the foundation, that is the true, enduring legacy of Thales of Miletus.
Join us and keep your curiosity well fed. Who knows? The next video might be exactly what you didn't know you needed.